The sun bleeds red across the Oduya highlands, a dying one stretched over a sky that has seen too many secrets. The village sits at the edge of the Igbo Ala forest, that ancient breathing darkness the elders say has a mouth and knows how to swallow. Smoke rises from 7 hearts. Women grind cassava in slow, mechanical rhythms. Children chase each other between clay walls. It is the kind of peace that lies. Inside the largest compound, torches burn around a circle of men in white chalk markings. These are the Izenai Council, 7 elders who hold Oduya's fate in their leather palms. Their faces carry the heaviness of a decision already made. They are not debating. They are confirming. At the center of the circle, a wooden staff is planted into the earth. From it hangs a strip of red cloth, the color of sacrifice. In a small room at the back of the compound, a girl sleeps on a woven mat. She is 7 years old. Her name is Oriako. Her hair is braided into 4 crowns. Her small chest rises and falls with the total innocence of someone who does not yet know that the people who named her have decided she must disappear. The elder's lips move in slow incantation. The head elder, Ichi Okafor, whose face carries a long scar from jaw to ear, presses his palm flat against a calabash of dark liquid. He drinks. They all drink. The pact becomes flesh. Outside the compound, Oriako's mother, Ngozi, stands at the entrance to the room and watches her daughter sleep. Her hands shake. Her jaw is clenched so tight the muscles pulse visibly beneath her cheek. She is not strong enough to stop this. She is not weak enough to pretend it doesn't destroy her. She is simply caught the way a bird is caught in a net it flew into willingly, once, long ago. She turns away. That turning away is the most violent thing in this scene. The red cloth on the staff trembles in a wind that has no source. They come for Oriako when the moon disappears behind cloud cover, as though the sky too wants no witness. 2 men carry her wrapped in a palm frond mat. She is still half asleep, confused, her small fingers gripping the edge of the mat. She does not scream. She has been told this is a blessing journey. A spirit walk the elders have chosen her for. She is special, they said. Chosen, they said. She believes them. That is the cruelest part. The men, Emika and Chukudi, both young enforcers of the council, walk the narrow forest path in silence. Their torches throw long shadows. The trees here are ancient and enormous, their roots breaking the surface of the earth like the knuckles of buried giants. Emika does not look at the child. He stares forward. His breathing is controlled. He has done difficult things before. Chukudi looks at her once. Just once. And then stares at the ground for the rest of the walk. They reach the boundary stone, a large flat rock carved with old markings, worn smooth by generations of offerings. Beyond this point is Igbo Ala proper. The forest the village does not enter. The forest that, according to every grandmother's whisper, takes what is brought to it and does not return it. They set Oriako down on the boundary stone. She sits up properly now, fully awake, looking between the 2 men with the wide eyes of a child who has just begun to understand that something is wrong. The air here is different. Thick. Warm in a way the night shouldn't allow. The trees stand so close together overhead that the sky is gone entirely. Emika places a small wrapped leaf beside her, a parting offering. Then he turns and walks back without another glance. Chukudi lingers. His hand hovers near her shoulder. He almost says something. But Ichi Okafor's voice seems to reach him even here, across distance, across forest, pressing down on his chest like a boot heel. He withdraws his hand. He follows Emika. Oriako watches them go. She does not call after them. She is 7 years old and somehow she already understands that calling after them would change nothing. She turns and faces the forest. The forest faces her back. Nothing happens at first. That is its own kind of terror, the long, suffocating nothing. Oriako sits on the boundary stone with her knees pulled to her chest. Around her, Ibo Ola breathes. The trees sway without wind. Insects that make sounds unlike any recorded creature pulse in invisible walls of noise. The darkness here is not the absence of light. It is a presence. It crowds. Then the lights come. Small at first, pinpricks of pale blue hovering between trees. Then more. Then dozens. They drift like slow embers from a fire burning somewhere deeper in the forest. They circle Oriako at a respectful distance, as though inspecting her, as though measuring something invisible about her. She should be screaming. She is not screaming. Her eyes follow the lights with an expression closer to recognition than fear. As though some part of her, some deep underneath part that existed before she was born, knows these lights. Has been waiting for this meeting. The ground beneath the boundary stone begins to pulse with a faint luminescence. Old carvings she couldn't have read in daylight now glow in a language older than Oduya, older than the Igbo tongue, older than the forest itself. From the darkness between two massive Iroko trees, a figure emerges. This is Yuzo, but calling Yuzo a figure understates what she is. She appears as an elderly woman, ancient beyond reckoning, her skin like dark bark, her eyes carrying the particular stillness of deep water. She wears no cloth, only markings. White, red, and the deep ochre of riverbed clay, drawn in patterns so precise they could not be human work. Her feet do not disturb the leaves. She stands before Oriako. She studies the child with those still water eyes. Oriako stares back. Her chin does not tremble. Yuzo tilts her head, a slow, deliberate movement. And then, with the certainty of someone confirming a prophecy rather than discovering it, she reaches out and presses two fingers against Oriako's sternum, just above the heart. The lights explode outward. The ground blazes. The trees bend inward like reverent subjects. Oriako does not flinch. Yuzo's expression shifts, barely, just enough, into something that on a human face would be called wonder. The forest has refused to take this child. Instead, it is deciding to keep her. Time moves differently in Ibo Ola. The sun does not rise here. The moon does not set. There is only a constant, filtered luminescence, as though the light comes from the earth itself, from deep below the roots of everything. Oriako is no longer 7. Not exactly. Time has moved in the forest the way water moves, without announcing its passing. She wakes each morning, if morning is the right word, in a shelter of woven branches and living vines that rebuilt itself around her while she slept. The spirits of Ibo Ola do not appear as they did that first night. They wear forms now, not fully human, not fully animal. Shifting. Teaching. Yuzo becomes her primary keeper. The old spirit woman moves through the forest with Oriako at her side, pressing the girl's hands against bark and root and stone and still water. Teaching her to hear what grows beneath sound. Teaching her the language of consequence, how every action in the physical world leaves a visible mark in the spirit layer that overlaps it, if you know how to look. Oriako learns to look. There are other spirits. Nekoji, a massive feminine presence that manifests as wind through tall grass, teaches her endurance, long runs through the deepest dark, her lungs burning, her bare feet finding footing on terrain no human should navigate. Ojin, a spirit that appears as a young man carved from iron-dark stone, teaches her combat, not the violence of anger, but the precise, controlled power of a body that knows itself completely. She falls. She rises. She falls harder. She rises faster. The forest shows her the village of Oduya as though through water, a wavering, incomplete image, visible only in the surface of the black river that runs through Ibo Ola's heart. She watches the village in these reflections. Watches the seasons turn. Watches the faces of people who thought she was gone. She watches her mother's face most of all. Ngozi appears in the river vision, older now, quieter. A woman wearing her guilt like a second skin, present at every ceremony, grinding harder than necessary, sleeping less than anyone should. Oriako watches and does not weep. She stores the image the way the forest stores water. When Yuzo finds her at the river one evening, staring, the old spirit presses her hand to Oryako's shoulder. The girl looks up. Her eyes, once merely dark, now carry that same deep water stillness Yuzo carries. The forest mark. The refusal signature. 8 years have passed in Oduya. The village has done what villages do with their worst acts. It has buried them under ceremony and seasonal rhythm and the careful maintenance of a version of history in which no child was carried into a forest and left on a stone. The children who played with Oriako as toddlers are now young adults. They do not ask about her. They have been taught not to ask about her in the particular way that silences are taught, not through direct instruction, but through the careful flinching of adults whenever certain edges of conversation get too close. Ichi Okafor is still head elder. He is older now, but no weaker. He presides over disputes and ceremonies with the absolute authority of a man who has never been publicly contradicted. His scar catches lamplight in every gathering. He has built more power since Oryako's sacrifice, an expansion that he attributes, quietly, to the appeasement of the forest spirit. The land has been fruitful. The village has grown. He believes this completely. That is what makes him dangerous. Emika has married. He has 2 daughters. He does not look at them the way most fathers look at daughters. He looks at them with a specific, quiet dread, the dread of a man who knows what can happen to daughters when councils decide they are necessary. Chukudi has not married. He drinks palm wine past the point of pleasure every night and sleeps poorly and wakes before dawn and walks to the edge of the village, always the same edge, always facing the forest, and stands there watching until the sun tells him to go back. Ngozi has not remarried. She maintains her compound alone. She keeps a small pot of ashes near her sleeping mat. Everyone assumes they are her late husband's ashes. They are not. They are from the first fire she built the morning after she let her daughter be taken, the fire she started, watched burn, and couldn't bring herself to use for cooking. The village is prosperous. The village is rotting from the inside out. Tonight, Ichi Okafor stands before the community fire at the monthly gathering and speaks of where 2 men left a 7-year-old with a wrapped leaf and people their retreating backs. The marks on the surface begin to glow. They eat from the communal pot. It is 3 hours before dawn. The forest at the edge of the village, no one in Oduya is awake to see darkness it. They have decided to stop looking at directly, breathe steadily. The air above the stone shimmers. Something with the in it has begun to move toward the boundary. And then, from between the massive Iroko trees, a figure steps forward and pauses at the boundary. Oriako stands at the edge of Ibo Ola. She is 15 now. Tall, built with the lean precision of someone who has spent years moving through difficult terrain. Her skin carries the forest luminescent markings, the same patterns Yuzo wears, pressed into her in layers over years of ceremony and teaching, visible only faintly in normal light, blazing in darkness. Her eyes are deep water still. Her posture carries a weight that has nothing to do with arrogance and everything to do with settled knowing. She carries nothing. She needs nothing. Yuzo stands behind her at the tree line. The old spirit does not follow past the boundary. This is Oryako's crossing to make. They hold each other's gaze for a long moment, the only farewell they will allow each other. Then Oriako steps off the boundary stone and onto the village road. The earth beneath her feet pulses faintly with each step, a rhythm her body carries out of Ibo Ola whether she intends it or not. The night air of the human world hits her differently now, thinner, louder in some ways, quieter in others. She breathes it in and adjusts. She walks slowly. Not with hesitation. With the deliberate pace of something that cannot be hurried because it is already exactly where it is supposed to be. The first house she passes belongs to a young couple who have been struggling with illness in their firstborn. As she passes their doorway, just passes, doesn't stop, doesn't touch anything, the child inside the house stops crying for the first time in 4 nights and falls into deep, clean sleep. The parents won't know why until morning. They won't connect it to anything until later. Oryaku moves through the sleeping village like current moves through still water, reshaping what it touches without announcing the change. She stops at last before a compound she recognizes from 8 years of river visions. Ngozi's compound. She stands outside it and watches the dark entrance. Her face carries the stillness, but beneath it, in the small muscles around her eyes, something older than stillness moves. Something that was 7 years old on a boundary stone and never entirely stopped being 7 years old on a boundary stone. She does not enter. Not tonight. She sits against the outside wall of her mother's compound and waits for dawn with the patience the forest gave her. Oduya wakes to omens it doesn't have language for. The goats won't go into the western fields. 3 women carrying water from the river all stop at the same moment, each at different points on the path, and look toward the village center with expressions they can't explain. A tree at the northern entrance to the village, dead for 2 years, has sprouted green overnight. Not slowly. Overnight. The elders gather before full sun and inspect the tree. Ichi Okafor touches the new growth with his fingertips and makes an expression he controls quickly, but not quickly enough for Emeka, who stands nearby and watches the elder's face and feels something cold pass through his chest like a blade of ice. Children are the first to find Oryaku. She is sitting in the village square by the time the sun is properly up, seated cross-legged on the ground near the central Iroko tree, perfectly still, her eyes open, her forest markings barely visible in daylight but present, like watermarks in old paper. The children gather in a ring around her at a distance of about 4 feet, not because anyone told them to keep their distance, but because they feel the boundary instinctively. They stare at her. She looks at them one by one, gently, without hurry. One small boy, brave or oblivious, takes 2 steps closer. His nose begins to bleed immediately. He is not frightened. He reaches up, touches the blood, looks at his fingers with genuine scientific curiosity, and then looks at Oryaku as though she is the most interesting thing he has ever seen. She holds his gaze and very slightly shakes her head. The bleeding stops. Word moves through Oduya the way fire moves through dry grass. By the time Ngozi hears the murmuring and steps out of her compound to see what has gathered the village, half the population is already assembled in the square at various distances from this strange girl who appeared from nowhere. Ngozi pushes through the outer edge of the crowd and stops. She sees the girl. The girl sees her. Something passes between them that has no name in any language. Ngozi's hand goes to her mouth. Her body makes a small, broken movement, as though all her bones have momentarily softened. The pot of ashes by her sleeping mat. 8 years of grinding and not eating properly and waking before dawn to check that the guilt is still there, that she hasn't accidentally lost it. Oryaku does not rush to her. She looks at her mother with those deep water eyes and she waits. The crowd watches. No one moves. Ichi Okafor arrives at the edge of the square. He sees the girl. He takes one look at the markings, one look at the eyes, and his face arranges itself into the expression of a man who is furiously calculating while trying to appear untroubled. He is very troubled. Ichi Okafor does what powerful men do when power is threatened. He performs authority so loudly that the performance itself becomes the story. He steps forward into the square, places his staff against the ground, and spreads his arms in the traditional gesture that commands assembly silence. The crowd quiets. He speaks, but this script does not carry his words, only their effect. He is constructing an explanation. A framework. He is telling Oduya what they are seeing before they can decide for themselves what they are seeing. His body language says, "This is known. This is managed. This is within my understanding." His eyes say something else entirely. They flick to Oryaku twice in the first 20 seconds, those brief, involuntary assessments that are less elder inspecting stranger and more guilty man measuring threat. She catches both glances and does not look away from either one. He speaks longer than necessary. This too is calculation, fill the air with his voice until there is no room left for other voices. Several heads in the crowd nod along. This is what they are used to. This is comfort. But Chukudi stands at the far edge of the crowd and does not nod. He stands very still, staring at Oriako. His hands have stopped shaking for the first time in 8 years. He is doing the arithmetic that doesn't need a mathematician, the girl's age, the time, the markings, the eyes that look at nothing in Oduya with the ordinary confusion of someone who has never been here before. She has been here before. Emike stands 3 people away from Chukudi, separated by strangers and 8 years of carefully maintained not looking at each other. He too is doing the arithmetic. His 2 daughters are somewhere in this crowd. He scans for them reflexively, as he always does, as he has done every day since carrying a child into a forest, and when he finds their faces, the expression that passes across his own is so complex it should be physically impossible for a single face to contain. Ichi Okafor finishes his construction. He has framed Oriako as a forest wanderer, a stranger, someone to be assessed and processed through council procedure. He makes it sound administrative. Routine. Oriako has listened to every word of this. She rises. She does not rise quickly or dramatically. She rises the way the tide rises, inevitable, unhurried, reshaping every coastline it touches. The crowd instinctively steps back 2 paces. Even Ichi Okafor's staff shifts slightly in his grip. She stands in the square of Oduya and she looks at Ichi Okafor and she does not say a single word. She doesn't need to. The forest taught her this too, that sometimes the most devastating thing power can encounter is something that requires nothing from it. The elder's mask holds. But behind it, something has cracked. The crowd eventually disperses, pressed back into their routines by the force of Ichi Okafor's administrative framing and the human need to pretend, for at least a little longer, that the extraordinary is ordinary. But Ngozi does not move from the edge of the square. When the last bystander has gone and only the 2 of them remain in the open space, mother and the daughter she surrendered, the square seems to expand around them, to become enormous, to become the only place in the world. Oriako walks to her. She walks slowly across the packed earth of the square, and each step carries the weight of 8 years of river visions, of watching this woman grind cassava and not sleep and press her forehead to compound walls in the dark early morning when she thought no one could see. Oriako has seen it all. She carried it all through Igbo Ola, this knowledge of what her absence caused the woman who let her be taken. She stops an arm's length from Ngozi. Ngozi is shaking. Not from cold. From the specific internal earthquake of someone whose carefully maintained structure, the structure of guilt and survival and moving forward because there was no other direction, has just been fundamentally disrupted by the presence of what they thought they'd lost. She reaches out one trembling hand and touches Oriako's face. The forest markings on Oriako's skin pulse gently, warmly, at the contact. Ngozi pulls her hand back sharply, then puts it forward again. Keeps it there. Her palm against her daughter's cheek. Oriako closes her eyes. Just for a moment. Just for the length of a breath. The deep water stillness breaks, only slightly, like the surface of a pond disturbed by a single pebble, and beneath it, just briefly visible, is the 7-year-old girl who sat on a boundary stone and watched 2 men walk away. Then the stillness returns. She opens her eyes. Ngozi has collapsed to her knees in the dirt of the square. She presses both hands to the earth and she breaks open, completely, without performance, without management, in the way that is only possible when the thing you've been holding yourself together against has finally arrived. Oriako kneels with her. She places one hand on her mother's back. She does not pull Ngozi up. She does not rush this. The forest taught her that some griefs must be allowed to run their full course, that interrupting them is its own violence. She simply kneels beside her mother in the dirt and stays. Above them, in a sky that is beginning to cloud, a single massive bird circles, black-winged, unhurried. A forest bird. It has followed her out. In the council room, those same walls that held the pact making 8 years ago, still marked at the base with the dark residue of calabash ceremonies, Ichi Okafor moves with the specific, controlled urgency of a man managing catastrophe. The 5 other surviving elders are present. The 7th, Ode Ezanwani, died 2 years ago, taking her portion of the secret with her. The remaining 5 sit in their chalk-marked positions, but tonight the chalk feels insufficient. Tonight the room feels smaller. Ichi Okafor lays it out. They sacrificed the child. The forest was supposed to consume her. The child has returned. More than returned marked, returned transformed, returned with the forest authority visible on her skin for anyone with eyes to see what those markings mean. The most junior elder, Nosu, who was barely 30 when the pact was made and carries the guilt most actively because he was least convinced at the time, suggests immediately that they confess. That they go to Nozi. That they perform the appropriate restoration ceremony. That they accept whatever consequence the community delivers. The room's silence answers him. Ichi Okafor does not argue against confession the way a man argues against a bad idea. He argues against it the way a man argues against an abyss, with the full desperate weight of self-preservation dressed in the language of community welfare. If the truth comes out, Oduya loses its stability. The elder system collapses. Everything built on the framework of their authority crumbles. The village suffers. He says this. He means, he suffers. Emeka and Chukwudi have not been summoned to this council meeting. They are not elders. But they know it is happening, the way you always know when people are in a room deciding your fate, a low-frequency knowledge that moves through walls. Chukwudi sits outside his compound in the dark, palm wine untouched beside him for the first time in years. He is making a different kind of calculation tonight. Not the arithmetic of guilt and survival. The arithmetic of what it costs to continue carrying something versus what it costs to set it down. He makes his calculation. He stands up. Inside the council room, Ichi Okafor has just convinced the other 4 elders that the girl must be handled carefully, neutralized through ceremony, through discrediting, through the subtle machinery of communal doubt that has always been the council's most reliable instrument. He does not know that Chukwudi is walking across the village to Ngozi's compound in the dark. He does not know that the forest bird still circles overhead. He does not know what Oriako is doing while the council plots. She walks. Not aimlessly, purposefully, quietly, through every path and corner of Oduya in the hours after her reunion with Ngozi. The village that raised her for 7 years and then gave her away. She moves through it the way a doctor moves through a body, reading symptoms, cataloging damage, understanding the system from inside out. The forest gave her this too, the ability to read consequence. Every act leaves its mark on the layer beneath the visible. She walks through Oduya and she reads what 8 years of buried guilt has done to the body of this community. She passes Emeka's compound. Through the wall, not magically but with the particular acuity of someone who has learned to read structural vibration, she senses the presence of his daughters, sleeping the sleep of children who have no idea their safety is built on a crime, and she feels the complex weight of that. She does not stop at his gate. She continues. She passes the shrine at the village center, the community offering place, maintained weekly with ritual precision by the women of Oduya, fragrant with palm oil and fresh kola. She stops here. She studies the offerings with those deep water eyes. She can see what the shrine cannot, that the community has been offering to a relationship they fundamentally broke. That the forest they've been propitiating has been listening with something that is not quite forgiveness and not quite anger but something older and more patient than either. She reaches out and adjusts one element of the shrine, a small repositioning of a kola arrangement, a correction. Something only Yuzo would recognize as former forest spirit protocol. The adjustment pauses briefly with pale light. She moves on. She climbs to the ridge above the village, a flat outcrop where she used to sit as a small child and watch the sun move. She sits there again. The village spreads below her. The forest behind her breathes against her back like something alive and familiar, because it is. She can see the council room from here. The lights burning inside. The shadows of men in deliberation. She watches without urgency. The forest prepared her for exactly this, for the moment when the thing that betrayed her tries to maintain its power over what it could not destroy. Yuzo spent 8 years on this specific preparation. Not revenge. Oryaku carries no rage. Rage is too hot, too fast, too easy to extinguish. What she carries is something the old spirit pressed into her slowly, over years, like Iroko heartwood forms, the patient, irresistible intention of a truth that has decided it will now be known. Below her, Chokudi crosses the village in the dark, moving toward Ngozi's compound. Oryaku watches him go. She knows what this is. She waits on the ridge for it to happen. Chokudi stands at Ngozi's gate and knocks with the knock of a man who has rehearsed this moment for 8 years and still isn't ready. Ngozi appears. She has been awake, she has possibly not fully slept in 8 years. She looks at Chokudi. She has always known something about Chokudi, the way mothers who pay attention know things. She has known for 8 years that he carried some specific, personal weight connected to her daughter's disappearance. She waited. She is still waiting, in her posture, in her eyes. He cannot say the words at first. He stands in her doorway and his mouth opens and closes, and the history of what he did, what he participated in, sits between them like a physical object, dense and immovable. Then his body makes a decision his mind hasn't fully caught up with. He drops to his knees in her doorway. His forehead presses to the threshold. His hands are flat on the earth. The posture says everything before his mouth finds the words. Ngozi goes still. The kind of stillness that happens when a body is trying to absorb something so significant that it temporarily forgets to perform normal biological functions. He tells her. Through the posture, through the gestures, through the fragments that eventually come, he tells her the night, the walk, the boundary stone, the red cloth, Ichi Okafor, the pact, the calabash, all of it. He tells her about his hand hovering over Oryaku's shoulder. About not being able to withdraw it fast enough. About the palm wine and the insomnia and the watching at the forest edge every morning for 8 years. Ngozi listens. She does not weep. She has already spent tonight's tears in the square. What she has now is something past tears, a cold, bright clarity that has arrived fully formed, having waited a long time for exactly this information. She looks at Chokudi on her threshold. She places her hand on his shoulder, not gently, not warmly, but deliberately. An acknowledgement. Not absolution. An acknowledgement. Then she straightens, steps past him, and walks out of her compound and into the night. He watches her go. From the ridge above the village, Oryaku watches her mother cross the dark street below. She sees where Ngozi is walking. She sees that her mother is walking toward the council room. She stands. She comes down from the ridge. Ngozi does not knock on the council room door. She opens it. The room pauses. 6 elders, Ichi Okafor and the 5, look at this woman who has entered their most sacred deliberation space without invitation or permission, and the 6 expressions form a spectrum from shock to terror to the specific face of Nwosu, who looks almost relieved. Ngozi stands in the doorway and she does not perform any of the things women in Oduyo tradition are expected to perform when entering a space owned by male elder authority. She does not soften her posture. She does not lower her eyes. She does not announce herself with the prescribed greeting. She looks at Ichi Okafor and she holds up one finger. One finger. The gesture of someone who has counted. Who has been counting for a long time. The head elder's composure is remarkable, he maintains it through pure muscle memory of 40 years in authority. He begins to speak. The administrative voice. The management voice. Ngozi turns and walks out. What happens next is not something any of the elders anticipated, because they are men who have long since confused the silence of a community with the consent of a community, and they forgot that silence is a vessel that feels and feels and feels until it is ready to become something else. Ngozi walks into the center of the sleeping village and she opens her mouth and she releases 8 years of managed, pressurized, carefully maintained silence in the most ancient form available to mothers of Oduya. The sound she makes is not a scream. It is the *u call, the morning cry that community law dictates must be answered by every compound that hears it. The sound that cannot be ignored. The sound that empties houses. It is traditionally used when someone has died. Its use here is technically incorrect and simultaneously the most precisely accurate possible usage. Lights come on. Doors open. People emerge, half-dressed, sleep-faced, alarmed, because the *u in the dead of night means the village body has sustained a wound and everyone is required to come see. They come from every direction. The square fills in minutes. Torches, lanterns, firelight. 3 generations of Oduya standing in the center of their village in the dark, looking at Ngozi standing in the center of them all. Then they see what emerges from the path behind Ngozi. Oriako walks into the square. In the full darkness, surrounded by gathered firelight, her forest markings are fully visible, not faintly watermarked but blazing, those patterns of white and red and ochre alive on her skin, her eyes carrying their terrible, untroubled depth. She is 15 and she has lived for 8 years with beings older than the village's entire history, and every one of those years is visible in the way she carries herself. The crowd breathes in, collectively, and holds it. Ichi Okafor arrives at the square's edge with the other elders behind him. He sees what he has built his entire management strategy around: preventing, the village assembled, Ngozi standing, Oriako present, all 3 elements in the same space at the same moment. He makes one last assessment. He attempts one last construction. He steps forward with his staff. Chukwudi steps out of the crowd and stands between Ichi Okafor and the center of the square. Just stands. That is all. But Chukwudi standing there, Chukwudi, who was there, who carried the girl, who knows, is a wall the elder's narrative cannot pass through. Ichi Okafor's eyes measure the wall. They measure Emeka, who has also moved, not to stand with Chukwudi, but to step backward, out of the elder's side of the square, to stand among the people. A small movement. An enormous one. The crowd reads all of this. Communities are remarkably skilled at reading the body language of their leaders when the stakes are high enough. They have been taught to look away from these readings for years. Tonight, with Ngozi's *u still ringing in their ears and a marked child blazing in their square, they look. Oriako walks to the center of the square. She stands beneath the central Iroko tree, Oduya's oldest tree, the one that has been there since before the founding, the one whose roots run beneath every structure in this village. She presses her palm flat against its back. The tree responds. The response is neither loud nor theatrical. It is simply undeniable. The ancient Iroko, in the full sight of 3 generations of Oduya, pulses with the same luminescence as Orioko's markings. Its roots glow faintly beneath the surface of the earth, visible through the packed dirt, a network of light spreading outward from where her hand touches bark, reaching under feet, under walls, under the council room itself. The forest, through this girl, through this tree, is introducing itself to Oduya at a frequency that bypasses the interpretive authority of elders entirely. Nwosu steps forward. He is shaking. He presses his forehead to the earth in the full sight of the assembled village. His gesture is a confession in a language every person present understands. Ichi Okafor stands at the edge of the square. His staff is still raised. His posture still holds. But around him, the architecture of 40 years of authority is making a sound like wood beginning to split. The village watches. The tree glows. The forest bird descends from the dark sky and lands in the highest branch of the Iroko above Orioko's head. By dawn, Oduya has changed in the way that things change when the change has been building for 8 years and finally finds its form in a single night. Ichi Okafor is no longer head elder by the time the sun clears the ridge. He did not formally resign, there was no ceremony. Power simply stopped flowing toward him, the way water stops flowing to a hand that has opened flat. He sits inside his compound and the village moves around him the way rivers move around a stone that has fallen in, continuing, reshaping, incorporating the new geography. Nwosu and the other 3 elders who were present for the pact are currently engaged in the first of what will be many restoration ceremonies, directed not by their own ritual knowledge but by Oryoku, who has returned from Igbo Ola with 8 years of instruction from entities whose understanding of spiritual consequence runs considerably deeper than council tradition. Emeka is sitting with his daughters. Just sitting. He is not explaining anything to them yet. He is looking at them with the full knowledge of what he did and the full knowledge of what he is going to have to do to deserve the ordinary daily miracle of sitting next to them. It is a heavy morning. Chukwudi slept on Ngozi's threshold last night and in the morning, she brought him water. Not forgiveness. Water. It is a beginning. Ngozi moves through her compound in the early morning light with a quality that is new, not lightness, exactly. Lightness would be inaccurate, would suggest the weight was gone. The weight is present. But now she can face it directly instead of carrying it sideways. Facing it directly is both harder and better. Oryoku stands at the edge of the village, the same edge that faces the forest, the same edge where Chukwudi stood every morning for 8 years watching the tree line. She faces Igbo Ola. Yuzo is visible between the trees, barely, only to Oryoku, only to whoever has the particular vision to see. The old spirit woman stands at the tree line, hands at her sides, with the expression of something that has completed a task that took considerable investment. The morning light catches Oryoku's markings and holds them, not blazing as they were in darkness, but steady now. Daytime present. Not hidden. Worn plainly, the way a person wears the history of everything that made them. The village sounds rise behind her. Pots being placed over fires. Voices talking. Children. The ordinary machinery of a community in motion. But different. The way the pitch of an instrument is different after it has been properly tuned. She turns away from the forest and faces Oduya. She takes a breath. She walks back in. The forest, Igbo Ola, that ancient breathing darkness with a mouth and a memory, draws back to its own edge. Settles. The luminescence beneath its trees dims to its ordinary ambiguity, visible or imagined, real or light trick, exactly as it has always been. It has done what it came to do. It gave back what Oduya refused to value. It gave it back worth more than the village could have calculated. The bird in the iroko lifts from the branch, circles once over the square, over the glowing roots still faintly visible in the packed earth, over Nwosu and the elders in their restoration circle, over Ngozi's compound, over Chukwudi with his untouched palm wine, and then it turns south and flies back over the tree line and is gone. Oryoku walks to the center of the village. She sits at the base of the iroko. She begins to teach.